back around the block a time or two to get it up to temperature so we can change the oil and put it to bed for the winter. Magic. Alright, so clean oil pan so we can see what comes out of the bike. This is what the oil in the bike looks like. So it's, you know, I don't want to put it away with that in there. Let's check the transmission fluid. It's nice and full, and it looks nice and new and clean, so we're going to leave that. We will not replace the transmission fluid. That'll be fine until the next service in the spring. Engine oil drain plug is here. I don't know if you can see that. Of course, right in the bucket. Now while that's draining, I'm going to look at my little magnetic plug, make sure there's not any big chunks on it. And there's not. It's pretty clean. So, new O-ring. I don't know if I'm in the shot or not, but there we go. Nice new O-ring. And just a touch of this thread sealer, which is nicely frozen right now. It's not warm in here. Just a little smear of that on the threads. You don't need to goop it right up. That's plenty. All right, we'll let that drain and come back. So I'm just going to slide this back. There we go. Now we don't need massive torque on these. The book says 18 foot-pounds. That's way too much. We only need it tight enough to seat the O-ring and keep oil from leaking, and tight enough that the plug's not going to fall out. So 8 or 9 foot-pounds is plenty. If you put 18 foot-pounds on these, you'll rip all the threads out of your oil pan about the second time you change the oil. That's plenty tight right there. bucket and make sure there's no debris in the bottom. And then we'll move on to the primary. So, back in a second. So, before I drain the primary, I'm going to check the fluid. To check the fluid, I need to remove the passenger floorboard because it's in the way of this bolt. And while I'm in there, I'll probably adjust the clutch. I just adjusted the primary chain tension recently. I mean, it's been a couple 100 miles, so I'm not going to worry about checking that. I know it's good. But I will check the fluid in here. If it looks nasty, I'll change it, and I'll adjust the clutch while I'm in here. You don't have to remove this completely, but for the purposes of filming and just because it makes it easier, I'm going to. You can just swing it aside. But these take a T27, that takes a 5/16. You don't need to tighten these super tight either. That fluid's pretty dark. It's hard to see with the camera. You get a lot of clutch material in here and wear from the chain and from the compensator. So I don't want all that crap sitting in there over the winter either. So I'm going to go ahead and replace that fluid as well. Even though it doesn't have a ton of miles on it, we're going to go ahead and replace it. So on this one, we got a big T40. On newer ones, you'll have a 5/8, just like your engine and transmission drains. All right, and let that drain. And I'll be back. All right, we're all drained out. This drain plug is just threaded all the way down. Some of them have a little bit of a shoulder on them. It all depends on what year your bike is. The new ones, and when I say new, I mean not a whole lot newer than this on up to the present, just have a 5/8 drain plug like the engine and the transmission. So with this one, I'm going to put just a little bit of thread sealer on it. It doesn't take a huge amount, you just need a little bit. Start it back in by hand. And it just needs to be snug. Just enough that it's not going to vibrate loose and fall out. You don't need to ram it right in there. That right there is tight enough. And I'll just kind of wipe it off. All right, so to adjust the clutch, we're going to come here to our cable adjuster, and we're going to crack this loose and run it all the way down. You want to be careful not to mash up your fender when you're doing this. Normally I'd put a towel over it, but So we thread that in. And we thread that in. Now our clutch lever is nice and loose. So now we've got an 11/16 deep offset, because that's just what works easier, and a 7/32 Allen. So we crack our lock nut loose, like so. We run this in until it's seated, and back it off about a half a turn. And there should be a little bit of play between this deal and your snap ring. Then we just tighten that nut back down. Like so. We're looking to get just a tiny bit of play in our lever as we tighten our clutch cable. There you go. You can kind of see the clutch lever there. I'm going to tighten that cable up. I might be in the way. Pretty much just right. So just a little bit of play there. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing when I tighten the cable or not, but we're going to try. That's tight. Let me put my boot back down. You want to keep a good eye on this clutch cable boot, because if your bike sleeps outside, or if you wash it too much, or if you ride it in the rain a lot, the clutch cable boot will fill with water, and the clutch adjustments will rust right up solid, or even rust and break off, so it's no good. But here's our clutch. You can see it as I pull the lever. It's fully disengaged, it's fully engaged. I've got just a little bit of play at the end. That's right where it wants to be. She's good to go. All right, I got a little funnel. That'll work. Got some genuine Harley-Davidson primary and gear case oil. I'm using this simply because I have it. When I'm out of this stuff, I'll probably start using Lucas, or I've got one case of Redline over there. Doesn't really matter too much what brand you prefer. All right. Let's let the last dribble out of the funnel there. This stuff's pretty thick anyway, but it's cold in here, so it's thick like honey. So, yeah. There we go. All right, let's get our cover back on. Now, you probably should replace this seal every time, but you don't necessarily have to. And this one's still in pretty good shape, so I'm going to use it again. And again, these don't need to be very tight. You have to be very careful not to cross thread them. There we go. Just enough to have it not leak and not rattle loose and fall out. That's tight. That's tight. That's tight. That's tight. And that's tight. That's all they need. They don't need to be super tight. Just snug. Let me grab a Loctite for that. That's kind of a big drop of Loctite, but we'll be okay. This wants to be nice and tight. You don't want this to rattle loose and have your lady burn her leg on your exhaust. That's why the Loctite also. I'll go ahead and pre-fill my fresh oil filter here so the oil has a chance to soak through the filter media while it waits for me to put it on the back. I like to pre-fill these so the engine doesn't have to work as hard to get oil, and so that the first startup after the oil change, the engine isn't dry for as long. There's already some oil in here to push out into the engine. So I fill it right to the top, and it will soak into the filter media and fill the can up as it sits. And sometimes I'll end up adding a little bit more before I put the filter on. And of course, we want to get some oil on the gasket. And I don't like to put all 4 quarts in. I tend to put in 3 and check it. And then add as needed to bring it to just below the full mark. And then after I start it up and let oil fill everything up and let the oil circulate a minute, then I'll check it again and add a little more if I need to. So we're right in the middle. Right in the middle on the dipstick. So we'll call that good until we've started it up. So let's replace the oil filter. And then we'll be ready to move on. That also does not need to be super tight. I don't know if you can see that. This part always makes a big fat mess. And there's really not a damn thing you can do about it. So I'll let that dribble out of there. Get this wiped off. And now that it's had a chance to sit, my filter's about half full, which is where you want it, so you're not just dumping oil everywhere as you put it on. So we run that down until it comes in contact, which is right there, plus 3/4 to 1 turn. And there's 1, 2, 3/4, and just a little bit. And that's tight enough. Don't over tighten it. It's a son of a bitch to get back off if you do, and they do seem to tighten themselves over time. So, contact cleaner, not brake clean. Spray in there a little bit. And this is why that front rubber mount always goes bad so quickly on these early twin cams with the rubber mount, or any early touring model with a rubber mount, because of where the oil filter is. All right, now we'll start her up, let the oil circulate for a few minutes, and then I'll turn the gas off and let it run till the carb runs out of gas. There we go, we're in neutral, choke's on. There she is. All right, fuel's all out of the car. We'll check the oil again and put some fuel stabilizer in the gas tank and lube the throttle cables. And then we can put her away and put the cover on and put her on the tender, and she'll be ready to ride in the spring. All right, so marine fuel stabilizer, because this will do a better job of keeping water out of the fuel. 1 ounce treats 10 gallons. We got a 5-gallon tank, so we're going to use a 1/2 ounce. I'm going to go get some gas for my gas can too, so I top this off as full as I can. Because if you're going to store the tank with fuel in it, you want it just as full as you can get it, so there's no room for the fuel to evaporate into the tank. So that's in there. Slosh it around a little bit to mix it in. Now I'm going to add just a little bit more oil. There we go, we're right where we want to be. Side stands lubed. Check these. No looseness, no play. We're good there. I'll lube the little heim joints in the shifter. These guys right here, where it can move. I like to get a little cable lube in there every time I change the oil. Sometimes in between too. And I like to make sure that none of these pinch bolts have loosened up. So, T25. Just going to open this switch cube up. Very careful not to lose my screws because they're hard to come by. Oh, it's backwards. There we go. I'm just going to open this up a little bit, squirt this down onto the cable. Let it make a mess, it's okay. And just work the throttle a whole bunch of times. And it's going to run down the cables and get them all lubed up inside so they don't stick. And this stuff kind of becomes a grease when it dries. Oh, there goes my screw. That excess in there really shouldn't hurt anything. If anything, it'll protect the switches from corrosion. Wipe any excess off the outside here. The throttle adjustment's pretty good, so we'll leave that alone. Alright, that carburetor is definitely dry now. Last thing to do is going to be to top off the fuel and park it in the corner, plug it in, and put the cover on it. There she is. Ready for winter.